Hello, and welcome to the lesson where we'll be discussing methods in Java. During this lesson, we'll discuss the following topics: the definition of a method in Java. We'll also discuss the syntax of declaring a method in Java. We'll discuss types of methods like void and non-void. We'll discuss the defining parameters for a method, return types of methods, method overloading, method invocation, parameter passing mechanism in Java, recursive methods, and Varargs in the methods. So, a method in Java is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. It is used to encapsulate a set of instructions that are executed together when the method is called. This encapsulation helps us to write more organized and maintainable code, as well as reuse the code when necessary. Let's take a simple example to understand this better. Suppose you want to calculate the area of a circle. You can write a method that takes the radius of the circle as an input and returns the area as the output. The code will look something like this. So let's write it. So we have already defined a class, and as usual, we already have a main method. But in this case, we want to define one more method. So let's do that. Public, this is an access modifier. Static, it means that it belongs to class, not to the object. We'll cover it later. For now, let's just use static. Double, it's a return type. Let's call the method calculate circle area. Sorry for the typo. Calculate circle area. This is the name of the method. After that, parentheses. And our method will accept a parameter. It is a radius. So let's define the double radius and brackets. So here is a method body. So within the method body, we'll write double area equals how to calculate area. It's p is 3.14 multiplied by radius and multiplied by radius again. And after that, we need to return the calculated area. Return keyword specifies what exactly we return. So in this example, calculate circle area is the name of the method. Here it is. The method takes one parameter, radius, and returns the result of the calculation, which is the area of the circle. Here. The keyword public makes the method accessible from outside the class. The keyword static means that the method belongs to the class, not to an instance of the class. We will discuss it in future lessons. And the keyword double specifies that return type of this method is double. In Java, you can declare and use methods in different classes, making it easier to organize and reuse your code. Okay, so let's try to call the method and see the result. Let's define double variable radius and assign the value of 3, for instance. And now let's calculate the circle area. Let's define a variable called circle area, and we'll assign the following value. We'll call the calculate circle area method, and we'll pass the radius as a parameter. So in this case, calculate circle area method will be called, and the radius, the value is 3 in our case, will be passed to the method. So everywhere here, the radius will be replaced with 3. So the circle area can be now printed to the console. Let's print it and see the output. Let's run the program. Okay, so we can see that the area is calculated and we have the following result. Also, please note that instead of declaring new variable for area, we can do the following. We can immediately return the result. But I suggest you to define a separate variable so that it will be clear and easier to understand what happens in the code. In summary, methods are an essential concept in Java programming that allows you to write organized, reusable, and maintainable code. To declare a method in Java, we use the following syntax as you can see at the example. Here, the modifier is used to specify the visibility of the method and can be one of the following: public, private, protected, or no modifier. We will discuss modifiers later. For now, you can always use public for the time being. The return type is the data type of the value that the method returns. If the method doesn't return a value, we use the keyword void. The method name is the name of the method. It should be a descriptive name that accurately represents the task performed by the method. The parameter list is a comma-separated list of input parameters. A method can have 0 or multiple parameters. If a method has no parameters, we use empty parentheses. Finally, the method body is the code that defines what the method does. Let's see this syntax in action by creating a simple method in Java that takes two numbers and returns their sum. So let's write the method. The modifier will be public, still public, static. The return type is int, add numbers, because we are going to some ints. And we have two parameters, int a, comma, second one is int b. So here int is return type, the method name is add number, let's rename it to add numbers, and we have two parameters, a and b, both ints. So here we need to calculate the sum. Let's define the variable result that will contain sum and assign it the sum of a and b. And let's return the result. Okay, so in this example, the method is declared with the public modifier, a return type of int, and method name of add numbers, and two parameters of type int, a and b. The method body contains two lines of code that calculate the sum of two numbers and store the result in a variable result. Finally, the return statement returns the value of result to the caller of the method. So let's call that method and see if it works correctly. So in the main method, let's define the variable called sum and assign it the value that will be produced as a result of the call of the add numbers method. So let's call the add numbers method with, for example, 3 and 4. So here we expect sum to be 7. So let's print the result to the console and see if we have the valid output. Okay, so as you can see that 7 was printed to the console, it means that everything works correctly. There are two main types of methods in Java: void and non-void. First, let's start with void methods. A void method is a method that doesn't return any value. It is specified by the keyword void before the method name in the method declaration. In this example, we have defined a void method named printHello that simply prints the string hello to the console. Notice the keyword void before the method name in the declaration. On the other hand, we have non-void methods, which are methods that return a value of a specified data type. For example, consider the following code from the demo 2. In this example, we have defined a non-void method named addTwoNumbers that takes two parameters, a and b, of data type int, and returns their sum, which is also an int. So notice that the keyword int is used before the method name in the declaration to specify the return type of the method. So these are two main types of methods in Java: void and non-void methods. Also, please note that we are currently using the static modifier. We'll discuss it later. For the time being, let's just use it. Let's cover method invocation in Java. When we declare a method, it's like we are defining a blueprint for a specific task. But until and unless we call or invoke that method, the code inside the method will not be executed. In other words, invoking a method is a process of executing the code inside the method. The syntax for invoking a method is quite simple. You just need to write the method name followed by parentheses. For example, if we have a method called printHello, then we can call it as follows. We just print the method name followed by parentheses. So let's run the program and see the output. Okay, so as you can see, hello was printed. And sometimes we may need to pass some values to the method to make it work. For example, consider the following method. To invoke this method, we need to pass a value for the name parameter. This can be done as follows. Print hello, and here as a parameter, let's write John, for instance. And let's run the program and see the output. Okay, we can see that hello John was printed to the console. And that's it. This is how you can invoke a method in Java. Note that when you invoke a method, the values of the parameters passed to the method are known as arguments. So the name is a method argument. A method can take input values, known as parameters, and use them to perform its operations. Declaring parameters in a method allows the method to receive input values from the calling code and use those values to complete its tasks. The syntax for declaring parameters in a method is quite simple. You add the parameter list after the method name and within the parentheses. Each parameter is declared with its data type and a name. Multiple parameters are separated by comma. So here's an example of a method that takes two parameters and both of type int. Let's declare the following method. Public static void, since I don't want this method to return anything, and let's call this method addNumbers. There will be two parameters, both of type int num1, for example, and int num2. Within the method body, let's define a variable called sum and assign it the following value. It will be num1 plus num2. And let's now print something like the sum is, and now let's print the sum. In this example, the addNumbers method takes two integer parameters, num1 and num2. The method adds these two values and prints the result. it's important to note that the parameter names are only used within the method body and have no connection to the variable names used in the calling code. You can use any valid Java identifier as a parameter name, and it's best practice to use descriptive names that clearly indicate the purpose of the parameter. It's also important to note that when a method is called, the values passed as arguments must match the data type of the parameters defined in the method signature. If the data types don't match, the compiler will generate an error. So let's now call this method in the main method and see the result. So let's call add numbers with the following parameters 1 and 3. And let's now run the program and see the output. Okay, now we can see that the sum is 4. Now that we know how to define parameters for a method, we can start using input values to perform more complex operations within our method. When declaring a method, we can specify what type of value it should return. The return type is specified immediately after the method's parameters using the return keyword. For example, let's define the following method: public static int add with two parameters, int a and int b. So in this example, the method add takes two parameters, a and b, and returns their sum as an integer. So in order to return the sum, we need to write the return statement and the sum, a plus b. We also can do the following way. We can create a separate variable, for example, sum equals a plus b, and here we can return the sum. But we can also return just a plus b. So when the method is executed, it returns the result to the caller. Okay, so now let's call this method and see if the output is the correct. Let's define one more variable, int sum, for instance, and we will assign it the result of adding 2 and 3. So it will be add, and we will pass 2 and 3 as parameters. And now let's print the result. Using the system out print line, let's run the program and see the output. Okay, now we see the 5 because 2 plus 3 is 5. So let's move on. If a method doesn't return a value, we specify the return type as void. For example, let's define public static void method. It's void because it doesn't return anything. Let's call it print message. So this method will just print something to the console. Okay, I want this method to accept single parameter of type string. String, and the parameter name is message. And now let's just print this message to the console. So in this example, the method print message takes a single parameter, message, and doesn't return any value. Instead, it prints the message to the console. Let's update the main method to call the print message method as well. So let's write print message, and in parentheses we need to specify what exactly we are going to print. Let's print just hello and run the program. Okay, we can see that hello was printed to the console. It's important to note that if a method is declared as void, you cannot use the return keyword to return a value. On the other hand, if a method is declared with a return type other than void, you must include a return statement in the body of the method. Otherwise, you will get a compiler error. So it means that this method, for example, should always include the return statement. But this method should not include the return statement because this one is void, but this one should return int. For void, we have nothing to return. Actually, we can use the return statement for the void methods with no return value, but we will discuss it a little bit later. And let's now look at the following example. Let's define one more method, public static int multiply. And there will be two parameters, A and B, as usual. And let's define the variable called result and assign it the result of multiplication of A and B. Okay, so this code will result in a compiler error because the multiply method is declared to return an int, but it doesn't have a return statement. So let's try to run it and check the output. Okay, so we can see that the code wasn't compiled, and it says that we are missing return statement here for this method. In summary, when declaring a method, you can specify the return type to indicate what type of value the method should return. If the method doesn't return a value, use void. And make sure to include a return statement in the body of the method if it's not void. Let's discuss method overloading in Java. Method overloading is a feature in Java that allows us to have multiple methods with the same name, but with different parameters. This means that we can reuse the same name for different methods as long as they have a different parameter list. To understand this better, let's take a look at the following code example. So in this example, we have two methods with the same name, add, but with different parameter lists. The first method takes in two integer arguments, while the second method takes into double arguments. When we call the method, Java will automatically determine which method to use based on the parameters we provide. If we provide two integers, the first method will be called, and if we provide two doubles, the second method will be called. So in the main method, you can see that we are printing the results of both methods. So the first call will call the first method because both arguments are integers. But the second system out print line will print the result of the second method call because both arguments are doubles. So using this dot, we specify that it's not the int, it's double. So it's also important to note that the return type of the methods doesn't play any role in determining which method to call. So let's run the program and see the output. Okay, so this is the output from the first line. So it's called the first add method with ints, and second one called the second add method with doubles. And in conclusion, method overloading is a useful feature in Java that allows us to reuse the same method name for different methods as long as they have a different parameter list. This makes our code more organized and readable. Now we are going to talk about the parameter passing mechanism in Java. As we know, a method may receive values from the calling method, known as parameters. In Java, there are two ways to pass parameters to a method: pass by value and pass by reference. Pass by value means that when a method is called, a copy of the value of the parameters is passed to the method. So if you modify the parameters in the method, it won't affect the original value. So here's an example to illustrate pass by value. And in this example, we first declare a variable x in the main method with value of 10. Then we call the method changeValue and pass x as a parameter, but before that, we are printing the value of x. In the method, within the changeValue method, we modify the value of num, which is a copy of x, and print it out. So we passed the parameter, we are trying to modify the value, and we are printing the value. Finally, we print the value of x after the method call. The output will be, so before calling the method, the x is 10. Inside the method, num will be 20 because num equals num plus 10. It means num equals 10 plus 10. But after calling the method, x will be 10. So let's run the program and see the output. Okay, 10, 20, 10. So as you can see, even though we modified the value of num in the method, it didn't affect the original x. On the other hand, pass by reference means that when a method is called, a reference to the object is passed to the method. So if you modify the object in the method, it will affect the original object. So here is an example to illustrate the pass by reference. Please note that this example includes arrays. We didn't cover arrays yet, but if you remember, an array is a reference data type, not primitive. So in this case, just to illustrate how it works, we need to pass a reference type, and array is a reference type, not primitive. So int is primitive type, but array of ints is a reference type. So don't care a lot about arrays definitions. I will just explain you how it works under the hood, but we will cover arrays later. So in this example, we first declare an array of numbers with values of 1 to 3. And then we call the method changeArray with passing numbers array as an argument to the method. Before that, we also print in the first element of the array. So we define the array with 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3. After that, we print the first element. The index is 0, because in arrays, the numeration is starting from 0. As I mentioned, we'll discuss it later. For now, just try to understand it at the high level. So we print the number with index 0, so it's 1. After that, we call the changeArray method and print in the first number again. In the method, we modify the first element of array, which is reference to numbers, and print it out. So we say that the first element of the array is now the very same element plus 10. Finally, we print the first element of numbers after the method call. So the output will be the following. So here, the first element will be 1 before calling the method. Inside, it will be 11 because we already updated it. And after, it will be 11 as well. So let's run the program and see the output. Okay, so we see that before it's 1, inside the method it's 11, and after calling the method it's also 11. So it means that we passed a reference to an array to the method, and within the method we modified the array itself, and after the method we are using the modified array. So this is a basic understanding of the parameter passing mechanism in Java. And it's important to keep this in mind when you are writing methods that take parameters. Let's discuss recursive methods in Java. A recursive method is a method that calls itself in order to solve a problem. Recursion can be a powerful technique in solving problems, especially when the problem can be divided into smaller subproblems of the same type. A key characteristic of a recursive method is that it should have a base case, which is the stopping condition, and a recursive case, which is the code that calls the method itself. The base case must be carefully defined to ensure that the recursion terminates and doesn't go into an infinite loop. Let's take a look at a simple example of a recursive method. Consider a problem to find the factorial of a given number n. Factorial of number n is defined as, so n factorial equals n multiplied by n minus 1 multiplied by n minus 2, and so on and so forth till we get to 1. So we can write the code for this problem using a recursive method in the following way. So in this code, we have created a method that takes int as a parameter and also returns int. The base case is if n is equal to 0, which returns 1. The recursive case is return n multiplied by factorial of n minus 1, which calls the method factorial with n minus 1 as its argument. The recursion continues until n reaches 0 and the base case is triggered. So basically, what's going to happen when we call this method with parameter of 5? So the 5 will be passed as an argument and we'll check if 5 is equal to 0. It's not equal. So else case will be executed. So we'll return n, it means 5, multiplied by factorial of n minus 1. So it's 5 multiplied by factorial of 4. And in order to calculate the factorial of 4, we'll do the same. So factorial of 4 will equal to 4 multiplied by factorial of 3, and so on and so forth till we reach 0. So when n is 0, we'll just return 1. So in the main method, we create a variable with name factorial of 5, and we assign it the value returned by the factorial method. And we pass 5 as an method argument. Afterwards, we print the results to the console. So let's run it and see the output. Okay, so we can see that the factorial of 5 is 120, which is correct. It's important to note that recursive methods consume memory on the call stack. So it's important to make sure that the base case is reached and the recursion terminates. In our case, it's terminated when n is equal to 0. Recursion can be a powerful technique for solving problems, but it should be used with care, making sure to define the base case and to ensure that the recursion terminates. Let's focus on the last topic, which is Varargs in the methods. A Vararg, short for variable arguments, allows a method to accept 0 or multiple arguments of the same type. In Java, we can specify a Vararg parameter by placing 3 dots, also known as ellipses, before the parameter type. This allows us to call the method with any number of arguments of the specified type. And here is an example of using a Vararg in a method. So in this example, the method printNumbers accepts a Vararg of int type represented by int and 3 dots numbers parameter. Inside the method, we use a for each loop to iterate through the numbers and to print each one of them. We didn't discuss the for each loop yet. We'll discuss it later, but for the time being, just for this example, just understand that this will print all of the numbers provided in the arguments. Under the hood, it's a just simple array of integers. We'll discuss arrays later, as I mentioned before. And let's now go to the main method and check what we have here. So we call the print numbers method 3 times. We can call it with no arguments, as in this example, with 1 argument, as in this example, and with multiple arguments, as in this example. In the first call, the method is invoked with no arguments, which is valid because the Vararg parameter allows 0 or multiple arguments. In the second call, the method is invoked with 1 argument, which is also valid. And in the third call, the method is invoked with multiple arguments, and all of them will be processed inside the method. So let's run the program and see the output. Okay, so the first method printed nothing. The second one printed these 5. And the last one printed all of the numbers from 1 till 5. It's important to know that only one Vararg parameter is allowed in a method. So I can do something like this, double. So it's not possible. And also, it should be placed at the end of the parameter list. So it's also not possible to do something like this, int a. We can only define it at the end of the list. So this is a valid case. This means that if you have a method with multiple parameters, the Vararg parameter should always be the last one. In conclusion, the Vararg feature in Java allows a method to accept 0 or multiple arguments of the same type, making it more flexible and convenient to use. That's it for the lesson. Thank you for attention and see you on the next one. Bye.